How's it going?
Good. Starting to get warmer, which I appreciate that.
That was kind of a surprise Saturday.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Okay, I'm recording.
Okay. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order now that we have quorum. Do roll call. I'm here, Patrick.
Ramiro is also here.
Sarah here. Lindsay here.
Okay, thank you. First item, approval of the agenda. We have a motion there.
Yeah, move to approve the agenda.
A second.
Thank you. Any discussion on that? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Agenda approved. Announcements, over to you, Tracy.
Alright, let me do this. It's over here. Yes, I have a couple of announcements. One is that, Emma told me that she's gonna be leaving the commission in June. So next month will be her last commission meeting, so just FYI, so she'll, I already told the city clerk's office, so she's already been added as a potential vacancy going forward, and, so the recruitments are happening, and so, I think something is going to the city council possibly in May, so we should be getting 2 new commission members, but since we take July and August off, they'll probably be starting in September. So we'll have, I don't know about the 3rd, but we at least have 2 for now, so, but now we'll have so our alternate, I guess, will be vacant. So anyways, I wanted to let you guys know that, so, we can do something. I'll have a little certificate for her and whatnot at the June meeting, so we can officially say goodbye to her.
Before you move on to the next thing,
okay.
Josh, do you have anything to add about new commissioners?
Yeah, so we have the 21st of May is scheduled to come back for all of our commission work, so that would be what you're discussing here this evening, as well as suggestions or appointments to commissions. Vice Mayor Whiteley and I are the subcommittee for that, and we start interviews Wednesday. So we'll have, for all the commissions, we'll meet Wednesday through this week, early next week, and then those recommendations will come back, full recommendation back to the council on the 21st for adoption.
Okay.
So the vacancies that still exist after that, we'll have to continue recruitment efforts.
Well, we could potentially have 2 new members for the June meeting. Is that what you're saying?
There's a bit
Well, I
of
don't
time.
time-wise, but
Yeah, because there's orientation, there's required trainings, there, it's a bit of a lift.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because you meet the first.
they have
week
some
of the
stuff,
month.
administrative stuff they have to do
Right.
before they can start, so.
Okay.
they probably could come to the meeting, maybe not participate in that way, but they're appointed to come and hear the
See it.
conversation or
Yeah,
whatever.
so there
just
are certain
get to know
forms
them.
that they have to submit before they actually take any votes on
Right,
anything.
yeah.
So the conflict of interest forms or required hours of required training that you will go through.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay. And then just, 2 other quick things. One is we did, close on the Gill Orchard 2 conservation easement on March 15th, so we didn't meet in April, so, it's been a while since we closed it, so it closed on March 15th, so that's
Great.
another 120 acres there.
Nice work.
And then we also had our second, including the commission, 3rd community meeting on the UCD wetlands project. So the 3rd meeting happened on April 11th, and it was over on the UC campus. We had it in the one of the landscape architecture studios, and we had a really good turnout, mostly because they had pizza, but it was a very good turnout, and we got a lot of good comments. And so the consultants have been organizing the comments into kind of subject area, and there's going to be a second now science advisory group meeting to kind of go over those comments and kind of try to settle on we've got those 3 drafts that you guys saw and gave comments on, and so now we have to sort of blend them into one based on the feedback. So that's moving along, but I just want to let you guys know that we had that second meeting and it was a lot of people that
Great.
showed up.
That's right. Is there, if the consultant team is preparing a summary of the comments, is that something that's posted somewhere or you can share?
No, but I could share it, yeah, it's
Okay.
it's a public document. They just finished doing it, and yeah, so I can definitely figure out a way to, it's on their Google Drive, but I can figure out a way to
Okay.
send it to you guys.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And that's all I have.
Commissioners, any announcements? Okay, then let's move on to public comment. Do we have any public comment? Items on the agenda? Okay, then let's move to the consent calendar, with the, item being the minutes from last meeting. We have a motion to approve.
I'll motion to approve.
Oh, second.
Any discussion on consent? Okay. All in favor of passing consent? Aye? Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's get into, the main agenda item of the night, which is essentially the purview of our commission and reviewing that.
And if I know you guys all have your computers and whatnot, but if you need an extra copy, I just printed it out there, in case you wanted a hard copy to look at. And so I think I'm gonna turn this item over to Zoe,
Sure, you want me to introduce?
and maybe she can introduce it, and then
The council subcommittee has been working for well over a year on this project, and back in January, they had an item that went to council, and there were some conceptual changes that were approved, and now we're kind of going through the process of going to all of the commissions where there were some proposed restructuring, so some commissions are being proposed to be merged, and others are just looking at some updates to their scope. So your commission is not one of the ones that's being proposed for merger, but we are looking to update your scope. And the language that is in your packet is what's being proposed right now. The subcommittee was really looking at trying to align things with some of the adopted plans that have been put in place since the last time the scope was revised, and really trying to get ready and align with council objectives and to get ready for the next general plan update, where commissions will really have specific roles that are identified. Right now, what you have in front of you is some language that if you look at it, it's very similar to what you're doing, but it's not as generic language as you had in your previous scope. So it's really specific to some of the things that are identified in your open space strategic plan, and really taking a look at the language. We want it to be the language that we use now rather than some of the other language that was used when the scope was first identified. And if you'll notice, one of the things that is slightly different than before is we really wanted to have only one commission where there was the lead on wildlife issues. And so before there was kind of a distinction between urban wildlife and wildlife in general, and now all wildlife is designated to go to this commission as well as its habitat. So that is something that's slightly different from what you had before, or it wasn't clear who the lead was. So those are kind of the small changes that are being proposed. And then Josh can kind of talk a little bit about big picture. But our next steps, so this is all these different scopes are going to the commissions. We're looking for input on the scope, and then the actual resolutions that will be structured will look at trying to give a little more flexibility on things like how often you meet, that sort of thing. So there may not be, unless you have an identified item, there may not be a need to meet every month. And there may be a need to meet a little more frequently if you have a real delivery of a project that you're working on. So we're trying to give a little more flexibility in some things, but we're not proposing that your actual membership changes. So it's still gonna be 7 regular, 1 alternate. And if you look at the scope, if you have any changes about the scope itself, again, I don't think we have in front of you your current one, we can bring that up if you need to look at that. And any changes, and then Josh, if you wanna talk a little bit about, the big concept for general plan. I think one of the specific elements in the general plan does talk about open space. So there will be a very specific role for this group with it, and what council has talked about so far is outreach and having the commissions play a defined role in community outreach. And so right now we are working on getting a consultant on board to lead that effort. So there will be a lot more to come with some specific tasks for you, and that'll probably be, we'll have an idea probably in the next month or so what those will be and what the timeline will be for that. I think that's all I got.
Yeah, you did great, you covered almost all of it,
Mhm.
or all of it, I can plug in some areas. Yeah, so as Zoe said, we were tasked, Vice Mayor Whiteley and I, over a year ago to kind of step back and look at commissions in general, and ways to have them be a more efficient, robust input into the work that we're doing at council. So after a series of meetings, meet with chairs, vice chairs, city staff, folks like, all across the board, we came up with a proposal, as Zoe said, that came forward early this year. There were some commissions that we proposed to be merged. If you look at what those mergers were, they basically they do all tie in with general plan, that required elements of a general plan. What we really wanted to have happen is to have our commissions really help drive the general plan process, and knowing what those elements are and plugging those commissions into those elements, and where they were overlapping work that was currently happening, saw the time to be able to put some of those commissions together to continue to work to move the general plan forward. As Zoe said, we are in the process of hiring a consultant. What we want to have happen is that the commissions are the outreach arm for their specific element, and they'll work hand in hand with the consultant to do that work. It's not us just coming to you and saying, hey, go out and do a bunch of community outreach, and I don't know, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but they'll help guide you through that process. In the meantime, we wanted to step back and look at what the authorizing resolutions were currently of all the commissions. They haven't been touched or moved or discussed or looked at in a long time. So that's one of the things that we wanted to do, was to create a more succinct and focused function for each one. You can see, I think every one of them, has 3 functions. We tried to narrow down the overlapping scopes and put them into functions that were very specific. So we didn't have these really broad pieces out there that really people didn't know what they were doing, what they were supposed to be doing, what they weren't supposed to be doing. There's a lot of confusion around that. So tonight, each commission, we put together what we thought would be kind of these new functions of the commission, specific to everyone, obviously, and just looking for your feedback on it. What are your thoughts on this? The word changes. Yours is, as Zoe said, there's not a ton of yours that was really moved around. We, talked with Tracy and her team around some of the things that were in here, and it was pretty straightforward around your commission and what needed to happen, but we're wanted to come in here. What you have to say about this? Do you agree with that direction? Do you think this is the right guardrails for your commission? And just get your feedback on it before it comes. As I said, right now it's scheduled to come to us on the 21st of May. And we're looking to kind of wrap up the whole commission structure on the 21st of May, as well as seated commissioners on the 21st of May. So kind of all that one big commission night, if you will, on the 21st. So we wanted to bounce around to all the commissions and hear what you have to say. And again, we're open to changes, open to your feedback, look forward to the conversation.
One thing, I think you mentioned that that outreach, you guys are going to be talking to consultants to revise outreach programs or whatever. I think that maybe including that, and it's gonna, the responsibility is gonna lay somewhat onto the commissions, maybe including that in the wording, sort of public outreach as well would be useful, and that could be an actual function of the commission, because I don't see it here. I just see advise on matters, this, that, but if we're also gonna be in charge of, public outreach, maybe including theirs.
Yeah.
Function.
Absolutely, and I think part of what we did, and we've heard that a couple of times, and we'll be more clear, Zoe, I think when we bring this forward, one of the things that we didn't want to do was include in the updated authorizing resolution verbiage that was specific to the general plan update, because then that language would then live in that part of your new authorizing resolution long after the general plan update's over. So I think what we need to do, and we can talk about this, is have maybe, some sort of another bullet point that's specific to the general plan update that describes that piece of the community engagement outreach that happens, so that when the general plan update is concluded, that piece can just come off. If we put it into here, we would need to come back and do a whole new authorizing resolution when the general plan update's over.
And that will actually be part of what the consultant is brought on to do. And so part of that will be discussions with the consultants to develop that process.
Yeah.
And then that whole process will come to council for adoption. So what we're looking at is where exactly the commission's role fits, what the timeline is, what resources we might need, whether it's staff or other resources. So that will all come to council for adoption. So that will be specifically the commission's role will be spelled out. It just won't be in your authorizing resolution, your scope right here. But the specific roles for commissions will be in a separate general plan only task that's adopted by council.
And if you're referring, I should have asked a clarifying question before I assumed what you were asking. If part of that is, if there's outreach that happens ongoing after the general plan that you want, that you think the commission should be doing, right, then that could be something that you put forward as a suggestion of like community outreach around our open space program, community outreach at a new habitat restoration when a project's complete, or South Fork, or in your commissions out there doing the engagement in the outreach. That could be something that, if that's of interest, so I didn't, if that's what you're referring to, or even if that's a piece, that's something that we could put in there. Specific to the general plan, on purpose, it's gonna be bifurcated.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And are those sort of, I don't know what you called them specifically, but those functions that are gonna be removed after the general plan is updated or whatever, are those gonna be applicable to all commissions as well as a whole? Okay, so it's like a general sort of.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, fine. It's in the word.
Yeah, and it'll be specific to your outreach. It may look different than what Parks and Rec is doing or the PAC is gonna do, right? Like the way that you interact and engage with the people who are gonna provide input around the open space part of the element there. You may come up with a new, different, creative way where you wanna reach people, so that part can be specific to, or unique to your commission, how you do that. You work with the consultant and say, hey, no, we wanna do our outreach at one of our restoration projects, or out at one of the parks, or whatever that is, and you may do that, where somebody else may just have an open meeting in council chambers, right? So it varies that way.
And just like a logistical question, who's commenting on those functions themselves, like the public outreach, like those other functions? Is the community a part of that as well, or is that separate? Is that
for the general plan update?
Yeah, like those functions, like public outreach and those sorts of things that we don't necessarily have to take care of. Who is commenting on those functions themselves?
If I'm understanding correctly, I think if you're asking like who's gonna, if you guys set up some sort of public outreach event, who's gonna be coming to it? Is that what you're asking? Sorry.
So, yeah, no, you're good. I mentioned including public outreach as one of the functions.
Yes.
You said that, I forgot the specific wording, that's gonna be included in the general plan update as a separate sort of thing.
Yes.
Who's commenting on those separate sorts of things and functions that don't necessarily have to be integrated into the commission function?
It would come to us as a council, and then it would be conversations with you and in your commission around how the consultant can work best with you, right? And get your feedback on that, on what the outreach is gonna look like. And then that would come to us as a council to approve the pieces within what the consultant comes up with.
Okay, so it's gonna be direct with the consultant or council, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha, alright, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Lindsay, Sarah?
I would be curious to that, you said we could see our old scope.
Can you, the website, pull that up?
I'll ask one question after you're pulling that up. I guess I saw the last authorizing resolution was 2006. Is that true, or was it more recent?
It probably was
That's-
2006,
that's right.
yeah.
I don't know what
Yeah.
my Google sign in is.
So,
You could do it without signing in.
I can?
so is this a frequency of updates then, every, what are we, 2024?
Yeah, I don't know.
Every 10 years.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure, I mean,
I'm sorry, what, I'm sorry, I missed
Oh,
the
is there a frequency of like regular update, or is it as needed, or what's
It's-
the, is it kind of like general
We
plan?
have some commissions that haven't been touched in honestly. So I think what we're trying to do is get it more routine, that these things are looked at on a frequent basis. The idea is, the commissions are advisory to council, so how do we help council in their decision-making process if we don't align with what the council priorities and the council objectives are, and with the city's objectives, and we have different projects, we have different technologies, we have different everything than we had, you know, a decade or two ago.
Sure.
So I think the idea is we will have a check-in more frequently, whether there's gonna be big changes, it will let the council lead on that. Some of the big changes this time were really to align around the general plan. Some of the big changes in the future might be to align around a community priority or whatever, you know, whatever it might be.
yeah, and I think it's also, part of it is, you know, over time, things we, you know, in a post-COVID world, we have the way that we look at how often we meet, the number of commissioners that are on there, like, do we have certain commissions that have a really hard time meeting quorum and have a really hard time getting commissioners to come onto that commission? So everything has been kind of always just set in this certain, it's 7 commissioners, or it's 9, and there's one vacant, there's an alternate, and it's been so rigid in how we approach it that there's recognition that there needs to be some flexibility back and forth between how these commissions work and function, that the way that it works for you may not be exactly how it works for the Senior Citizen Commission, or how it works for the PAC, or how it works for Civic Arts, right? That they are all different bodies, and we need to be able to be flexible and make sure that they are working in an efficient way. And we ask everyone sitting here to take time out of your lives to come and spend time doing this and do this work. We want to make sure that your time is valued, that the work you're doing, you feel that it's valued, and that we're getting the most out of the work that you're doing. And knowing that we can move things around to do that has been kind of another piece of what we're trying to do.
That's great. I have additional questions that do you want to return to?
No, I just wanted to read it.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see that.
Could you zoom in a little bit on the bullet points?
How can I zoom in here?
You do like Control Plus, or use the
Right, click.
there's like the scroll on the mouse that works too.
Control plus?
Thanks.
Go worry.
Okay, yeah, I think it's really great to take a fresh look and to do the update. I guess some of the context in terms of what has changed in terms of the mergers, and maybe this one hasn't changed as much, but I think it's hard, I think for me to understand the bigger, like without seeing what the other commissions are doing, especially around like, where did the change from wildlife, is that natural resources?
Tell me a little bit about
And
what's
so,
going on.
I think it might be helpful, I think we talked last time about the general plan update as well, and just the connection of with other commissions, and like helping to, like how that connectivity across those groups and how those conversations where there are, I know there's like these subcommittees that happen, or we have these liaisons, I know Sarah and Patrick, you filled those roles, but just like, is that the model that you're envisioning with these new changes as
So,
well?
I think there's a couple things going on. Number one is we're trying to streamline where possible. And we want it to be so that we have a commission is the lead on something. And if other commissions have a role to play, a interest, that they assign someone to go to that lead commission body. We did that with the CAP, I don't know if you had someone, I think you had someone
Yeah.
assigned. We did that with the Urban Forest Management Plan. So we're trying to say that's our new model. The idea is, we want not only commissioners to know kind of what their role is, but we want the public to be able to know that if I go to this one place, then I can follow along with this one group rather than having to go to 6 different groups to find out. So that's one of the things that we were really looking at. The other thing is we did things like for transportation, which has an element for the general plan. We are proposing that there's a Bicycle Transportation Street Safety Commission, which itself was a merger of 2 different commissions from like 8 years ago, something. It used to be Safety Advisory and then Bicycle. So that then became Bicycle Transportation and Street Safety. And then there is this separate group that they have, it's Unitrans. And so a separate group that had this requirement that they meet once a year to talk about Unitrans routes and rates. And then it kind of became a little bit more, they're talking about some specific requirements based on their funding for like language plans and all this kind of stuff. And so we were looking at, well, doesn't it make sense to have just one spot for transportation? So it's the focus of transportation and it aligns it with transportation element in the general plan. One of the big ones that is being proposed is to merge the Tree Commission with the Natural Resources Commission. And that is being proposed to create a new climate and environmental justice. And so that's probably one of the bigger ones. And a lot of that has to do with the CAP document that has been adopted and really focusing on the implementation of that document rather than the creation of that document. And hopefully the CAP, along with the open space plan and along with the downtown plan, some of these other really large planning documents that we have, we're trying to align the implementation of these documents, and then all of that hopefully will lead into the general plan. So we're trying to align all of these like baby steps that we've been taking to get up to this big general plan. So a lot of the other one that they were looking at is we're taking initial steps to merge a historical resources management commission into the planning commission.
Yeah.
So that is gonna take a little bit longer. There's some more steps, we have to consult with the state. But a lot of that is like, we want there to be one main planning group. So it's kind of like the idea is one focus.
Yeah, I guess my question is more related to the functions, like are there any functions we should be aware of, like you pointed out, like on wildlife?
That is the big one.
Access to any other.
That was, the other thing that we were talking about was integrated pest management.
Okay.
And we were looking at, that has a little bit of a touch point here, a little bit of a touch point in Rec and Park, a little bit of touch point in the new climate and environmental justice. And we thought that for now, the nexus made more sense to be at climate and environmental justice. So that was the one that was kind of being discussed, and that could change in the future. So that was, there isn't a lot of big changes, again, because you already have a really well-defined group. You have not only the open space strategic plan, you have a whole chapter in the municipal code that really has defined role as to when there's a development project, you have to look at ag mitigation and all of that. So it's, you have pretty good definition. In the future, if that changes, after the strategic plan in 2030, I mean, that could be another time when we want to look at what does the future look like for this group? Do we merge it with another group, or do we have a different focus? That kind of thing.
Thanks, yeah, that was one of my questions too, sorry, I'll stop after this.
No,
About
keep going.
2030, like maybe that's too specific, if we're talking about there is no recurring sort of update cycle, maybe like something more broad there about the implementation of the strategic plan. If it's,
I think we want to have these, like jumping off points. So for instance, the CAP is 2040. So we specifically identify this as the CAP 2040. We're focusing on implementation of the CAP 2040. Right now, they're looking at, I think it's the Parks and Facilities or Parks Master Plan. So whatever the end date for that is, so the Recreation and Park Commission will focus on that specific plan. So again, we want to give future councils a way to say, is this still aligned with, what our focus is?
okay. Yeah.
I understand there's like an effort to define commissions more stringently than before. However, I do really like the wording previously of working cooperatively, or maybe, you know, wording it a different way, but also that sort of emphasizes that we're a commission who's open to, you know, collaborating with others. And given that there's this new commission called the Climate and Environmental Justice Commission, which is a topic that we've touched on several occasions. I think we even had somewhat of a subcommittee on it at some point, I think led by Emma. It had something to do with environmental justice or social justice. But anyways, I would like to personally see that sort of worded again in the new update, and inclusive of the new commission, which is Climate and Environmental Justice. That would be input that I have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Do
just,
you see a specific place in here that it would, mesh best?
yeah, I think, let's see. I'm not sure if it could mesh in with these specifically, but perhaps, you know, adding another one, or.
Yeah, and just to give a little bit of context to that one, I think part of the reason why, and I hear what you're saying, and I'm wondering if there's not maybe like an overarching statement just in general that's like at the forefront of of all of our commission documents
Yeah.
that implies that. Like when we sat down and thought about it, but we were like, well, we would expect that would be what our commissions would do, right? Like that they would work cooperatively with other commissions over areas that they have mutual interests. Like, so I think when we looked at that, it just seemed like we were that would be implied that commissions would do that, and that it just seemed redundant to have that on all these different commissions' functions. But I do think it's important, and I appreciate what you're calling out, and I wonder if there's a way that if it's not specific to a function that's listed under every single commission, because then that would, you would apply it to every other commission and what their overlapping mutual interests may be, and not specifically calling out a certain commission saying, this is the ones that we expect you to work with, but maybe there's an overarching statement at the beginning that talks about kind of the mutual cooperative nature in which we expect commissions to work and how
Well, and
commissions work.
I do have a couple comments. I forgot to mention that we are gonna have one resolution really talks about kind of this overarching language for commissions. So we want there to be, the focus is on environmental justice, the social equity, like all of those things that have really been some of the change factors for council in the last, 5+ years. We're gonna have that as the intro to commissions. Like we want this to be the lens through all of the work. And sometimes that means that you might make your decisions slightly differently than you have in the past. And as far as working cooperatively, we used to have, and it's been a number of years since we had them, we used to have assigned liaison roles from one commission to another. And again, we've done away with that, and that was a specific council direction from a few years back, because we want there to be this idea of the lead commission. So when you have a lead in another commission that's working on something that you think that there's a real nexus to open space, then you have a discussion here and you say who would like to be our liaison to that group. And then that means that you would sit at the table with them, you have the full discussion with them, same as what you did with the CAP. And so we're trying to be a little more nimble in how we treat these things rather than this assigned liaison where they felt like they had to go to every meeting and pay attention when they really only wanted to follow one or two items.
Yeah, it was cumbersome.
It was cumbersome, right? Yeah.
I think Ramiro and I are like having similar points about just like it helps, I think, the public understand where even if there is a lead on like there's a single place for the lead of a discussion on a topic, I think it does facilitate public understanding to understand which groups are talking about connected topics or like helping to bring awareness to that connectivity of these groups work together more. There is that liaison more often between these because these sections of the general plan are related. So I could see where maybe you wouldn't want to add it to the list or the resolution, but maybe helping to build that connectivity.
Yeah, and I think
the governance structure, I think would help public understanding.
Yeah, and I really appreciate both of those comments because that's one of the things that we, as we processed through this was like, how do we get more people engaged and involved in not just to be a commissioner, but come to a meeting, right? To be involved in this process when it's something that oftentimes people come to one of the meetings or city council meetings when it's at the last minute and they don't agree with it, right? Like, I can't believe this is gonna happen, and then they come to a meeting and they're only kind of engaged or interacting with commissions or council at this point where there's frustration or they don't agree with something. And I think, so I appreciate you trying to, bringing it back and making a connection to try and getting, to have people more engaged, involved, make it easier to understand what people, the general public, to see what's happening. Oftentimes, even I would imagine for commissioners and us as council members, we're so inside baseball with all of it, because once you're on a commission, and you start to understand what's happening, and that isn't what the case for most people in our community. So I appreciate you guys continuing to call that out. I think Zoe has that down, and I think we can, when we meet, find ways to make that work.
So, if I can jump in for a second, I think that, as much as possible, everything should be explicit as opposed to implicit. But I agree that we don't wanna, encumber each of these commission descriptions with all the different, potential interactions. So, does that sit okay with you, Ramiro, to have it as kind of an upper level, explicit thing where we expect the commissions to work together?
Yeah, and I think it could also be part of the public outreach sort of function that we were talking about and discussing earlier, is sort of letting people know how exactly, or not how exactly, with whom exactly we can potentially collaborate,
Yeah.
Us as an open space and habitat commission, we might not have as much with the civic arts, but a lot more with environmental. So sort of making those connections when we have that public outreach might be super useful if we're not gonna directly write it in here to the functions.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's a good point.
Other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Do you wanna take public comment?
Oh, yeah.
Naive questions, but it's my first meeting here and I'm super clueless on all of the history. But I'm interested in the commission, so I was just reading this. I guess I have two questions. I'm not strongly opinionated on them, but I'm curious. I noticed that the new resolution doesn't include environmental education, and I know that now we have public outreach, it sounds like, for all of them. So I don't know if that's a replacement, or is this commission not intended to do environmental education as part of its thing anymore? And maybe related to that, I was curious if you had a list of functions for the Environmental Justice Commission, because it sounds like there's potentially overlap, especially in the education area. Anyway, that's me as just the outside, I have no idea what's going on person.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so, I don't have too many responses to that. Did people want to address that at all?
The education
No.
component?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, so can you remind me, I'm trying to remember, did that get plugged in anywhere? Do you know, because when you look at the,
A lot of this is when we broke down implementation of the open space strategic plan, there's a lot of detail in that plan. And so part of it is we don't need to be specific with everything. So we're looking at what you do, not how you do it. And part of the holding these meetings is education. Part of what we're doing with outreach is education. So if you're talking about, are you creating educational materials? You have done that in the past. I don't know if that's something that you will do in the future, but a lot of it is around a specific project, a specific program, and that's part of what you do for that project, that program.
Methods to.
Yeah. So I think that's, again, one of those things that any commission is really about helping, helping the public, helping the people that are actually assigned to be a commissioner, to do this in the space where everybody can feel like they know as much as possible about it.
I guess the one thing I would add to that is just that, the strategic plan does have a whole, as we all know, has a whole, public outreach, public engagement, partnerships, right? It has all that, and so even though, yeah, it's not explicitly stated in here anymore about that, but I guess, I don't know, I guess I personally kind of saw that as, for example, the commission has been commenting on the interpretive panels, right? That would be environmental education, right? But I guess, that's usually related to habitat restoration or, a project, right? But I mean, we could add that. I don't know if we necessarily have to put I don't know. I mean, is it one of those, because again, I feel like those kind of things are in there's all sorts of signage stuff in the strategic plan. So a lot of things are covered by that third bullet on the strategic plan, but yeah, it's not, you'd have to know that. It's not explicitly called out. You'd have to know what's in the strategic plan to know that. So that's true. So I don't know.
Lindsay, do you have something in
Well,
response on that?
Yeah, I still think this third function about the strategic plan, I still think that 2030 is too specific, because it assumes like changes that happen. I mean, we haven't even talked about updating the strategic plan of the commission, have we?
No, it's coming up though.
Yeah, and just like, I guess if this is supposed to last the duration of the general plan, which is on like some other timeline, I think and the resolutions aren't updated on any frequency, it just seems like we would be serving the city council on implementation of the open space strategic plan, no matter what, like whatever timeline, but it just seems a little out of place to me, but it seems like it also gives some flexibility within the strategic plan to address some of these other items and really call it out, like as a priority for the 5-year, whatever year time period it is throughout. And those all go to the city council, right? So it seems like unless there's some like specific like timestamp check-in that's not being met, I guess that's the part that's unclear. Like, is it because there's some performance metric not being met? Otherwise, it seems like
Well,
we do
there
go
is
annually.
a real thing about the 2030 too, because that's when our tax expires,
Yeah.
right? So we have like this, if we renew everything, the tax, the program, everything, then it would make sense to have this in perpetuity. But there is a place where we're gonna have to do a lot of discussion about that. I mean, it's an assumption that we would continue it. It's not a guarantee that it would be continued. So it's kind of one of those things like, if we didn't have that resource, that funding source, would we have the same strategic plan process? Maybe not. So again, it's like there's a little more to it.
That makes sense. And maybe to your point, Patrick, about the explicit component of, like, I think the general community might not see that piece, so that might be helpful, just to add a little
Yeah, because something like that would have
some
a lot
context.
of outreach to it.
Yeah,
And probably a good year before anything would be on the ballot or anything would be like an adopted plan. It would be like, that would be quite a role for you guys to play.
Well, what about changing the 2030 to current, like, of the current strategic plan for the open space program,
Instead of putting a date on it.
instead of putting 2030, because then it is more flexible, instead of putting a year.
I think that makes sense to not straitjacket it to 2030.
I have one other, so I know the questions for the subcommittee, is this proposed scope manageable for the commission? I think that's a really good question. I think we've talked a lot about community outreach and engagement and the general plan update process, and I think even with a consultant help, like just the details will matter of like whether or not all of that is manageable. Even like these UC Davis restoration partnerships, like I couldn't make it to either one, like open house same night for kids, so just like, I think to your point earlier to Josh, city council member, but just the making it manageable to be engaged as a public and a commissioner. I guess I'm worried about that scope creep component for me of like, well, there's all this public engagement we'd love to do within the strategic plan, and just like the capacity to do that now is hard. And then I know the general plan update is a priority for the city, and so just, I guess I'd flag maybe not in that piece if that's part of the function.
Do you have a proposal would be manageable? I'm trying to understand, would it be like meeting every other month? Would it be fewer tasks? Would it be?
Well, I think we talked about last meeting, like just flexibility on how the meetings occur, like the ability to do hybrid or, yeah, flexibility, I think of like maybe that we don't meet monthly or, you know, just options for that, for how the commissions meet generally. And then on the public engagement piece, like, I think I'm still unclear on what's being proposed of like how much time, Mark, the commissions are expected to engage in the public meetings, or is it that those public engagement opportunities happen at our regularly occurring meetings?
This would be a focus of your meeting instead of in addition to your meeting.
Okay,
So if that helps
that's
that
helpful,
piece.
yeah.
Again, it would be, I don't know, Josh, maybe 6 months,
Yeah.
maybe a little more. So the idea is, the general plan will be taken in pieces. And there's gonna be quite a lot to it, but the starting point is gonna be a lot of this outreach. And we think it's gonna be 6 months, 9 months, I don't know, I am not in those discussions. But it would be, instead of your regular meeting, it would be, you're doing community engagement with a consultant to help and lead the process.
And there would be certain things that were, I mean, just, I think to be clear too, there'd be certain things that would come forward if the commission needs to take action on the property accusation. I mean, there's other pieces of your work that you do on the commission that you're gonna have to do, right? As we see some of these projects coming forward, some of these development projects, they're gonna come to this commission for feedback on some of the open space work, right? So there will still be that work that's ingrained that needs to go through this commission for your feedback and your input. That's gonna have to happen. That doesn't just get put on the back burner, right, to your point. But I do think that there's a process of really laying out a detailed approach with the consultants when they come forward. The consultants that we're looking at, this is what they do. This isn't like a part, you know, this isn't like, oh, we've done this once before. It's a complete, I mean, it's not a 100% overhaul, right? But we're doing a pretty big mix up of the general plan. So the people the consultants know this type of work, and we're gonna work closely with the commission to say, what is it that we need to do to get you there? Now, we have, as a council, have laid out what we think would be a wonderful timeline to get this done. It's a very ambitious timeline. And I hear your feedback, right? That would include a lot of work and heavy lifting on commissions to do it. And the timelines with the CEQA process and all the work that needs to happen there, it's a multiple year process. The last one was 8 years.
Yeah,
And we
it
don't
had a really large,
Yeah, we don't want it to
20+
be.
member committee, and it was,
We don't
we're
want it to
trying
be.
to do it very differently this.
But your point is well taken, that's why I put it on there, that it is a lot, and I think that there's ways that can be balanced, and that process will be driven by this group in work with a consultant. And I think laying out realistic expectations on the work that you can do, especially when you look at the horizon of projects or things that are coming forward, and working with Tracy around, hey, this is what we have coming up over the next 18 months. How can we cram all of that and the general plan update work that we're supposed to be doing into this timeline? So I think that's gonna be a process, and you know, something you guys have to go through as a commission to lay out what that looks like and realistically set that up. But you're right, it's a lot to ask, and I think that what we want to have happen is to have the process be one in which, when it's over, when it's done, and we adopt this general plan update, that all of our commissions are, I mean, it's a really unique opportunity, right? I mean, this is setting, like, you guys are gonna be part of this process that identifies and says, this is how we are going to grow, what this city's gonna look like for the next, 20 years, right? I mean, you're gonna be at the forefront of doing that for a community that you live in and raise kids in or go to school in or whatever it is whatever your connection is. And I think that's a really cool opportunity. So we want you to feel empowered and engaged in that process. And it's not like, this is just too much, I can't do this anymore, I'm out, right? Because we have really good commissions, we have good commissioners, and we wanna make sure that they feel empowered to do that work. So however we need to manage that workload, we're willing to look at that and have those conversations and hear that from the commissions when the consultants are brought on. But it's a real concern, I understand that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have feedback on wording. In terms of, okay, so our commission name is Open Space and Habitat. And I'm wondering, and then the two top functions that aren't related to the strategic plan seems to be separated for some reason. I was kind of like pulling out keywords. So in the first function it says open space, habitat, wildlife, trails, funds for open space. And in the second function there's it seems to be more of this focus on agriculture. Also says open space, it says acquisitions for open space, but I don't know if it's specific to open space, agricultural open space, and then policies on acquisition. So I guess I'm curious about, first, like the title, open space and habitat. Is habitat kind of nested within this idea of what we're doing with open space? Or is it actually, we do open space stuff and then we also do habitat stuff, and sometimes they're connected and sometimes they're not? And then the second thing being these two functions, is it separate? I guess I'm very much like, okay, if you were to say, describe each function in 2 words, you know, would it be like the first function is open space that's not related to agriculture, and then the second function is open space related to agriculture? Or, I mean, I'm kind of seeing that as maybe that's the thought process behind this, but it also doesn't seem to fit exactly under those 2 titles. So, yeah, I guess I'm curious about more of the thought process behind the separation between the 2 functions, and even the title of the commission.
Sure.
I don't know if that's like pretty loaded.
So I can speak to a little bit of that. So the second one, the second bullet is more on, what I was trying to get at with that one was more on what is in the ordinances, you know, the ag buffer ordinance, the municipal code, basically, the ag buffer ordinance, basically it's what's in the muni code. So it's, you know, the right to farm ordinance, and then it's also the Measure O, the tax, which is also in the muni code. So it's, which has to do with acquisitions. So it was kind of meant to get at that more, so
Okay.
what are, you know, actual like what are things that the muni code actually calls out the commission to do, right? So
Okay.
that was kind of the intent behind that second one. The first one was more to kind of think about sort of broad categories that are in the strategic plan, just broad, not every single one, but sort of broad categories about, you know, what the commission focuses on, like habitat restoration, wildlife. So it was more kind of thinking about sort of the broad categories that the commission touches on that are also mentioned in the strategic plan. But I didn't call out every single, like I didn't put in public engagement, but I mean, we can definitely change it. But I mean, I guess that's just the thinking about it. The second bullet was more like what's in the muni code.
Yeah, I think that would be super helpful to actually like be explicit about, like these are like, if this, because to me it's confusing, to me it feels like redundant wording and not like clear of like what the separate function is.
Well, and the second one isn't just agriculture.
Right, but it's, yeah, exactly. So maybe exactly what you're saying, like these are, this function is specific to upholding what's in the municipal code. I don't know, that's my suggestion. And then maybe like the first one is, these are all the topics we would touch on as a commission.
And I see the first one is more about management, the second one is more about acquisition.
Yeah, maybe management acquisition. Yeah, that's, okay. But then it says like, and the spending of funds dedicated to, oh, so you can say that's management.
Well, the reason that's there is because, you know, we talk about the budget, but the budget isn't in the muni, you know, talking about the budget isn't in the muni code, but, you know, we do that, we talk about the budget, and it's related to Measure O, but we don't just talk about Measure O. We talk about the open space program budget. So I guess that's why I put that there, because we do, there's that oversight, right? There's that oversight of the program budget, and what the budget, you know, there is input into that, what the funds are spent on. So I don't know,
I mean, would it be useful to have Measure O in, like explicitly stated in the function, since it is so what's the word?
But there are open space funds beyond Measure O
Measure
is
O.
the issue, yeah.
Well, I mean, we could say the open space parcel tax.
Or open, okay.
But again, I guess I wasn't, cause it's not just that though, you know, there's open space development impact fees, there's even the general fund, you know, there's ag lease revenue, so it's, that's why I said funds dedicated to, because there are other funding sources, you know, it's not just Measure O. So that's why I was kind of more general there, not calling out the tax.
And Measure O may end on the next vote for Measure O.
Yeah, Measure O could end. But I guess what I'm hearing from you guys is that you don't understand the connection between you think they're redundant, or that there's a.
Yeah, I feel like the two functions, when you just kind of read it, it feels a little like, I'm not sure why they're separated, but then it kind of is.
Well,
There's
the
like a
second
lot of
one is
agriculture in the second one, so it's like, okay, maybe it's like really agriculture focused. It just isn't very clear.
It's the Muni code. So the second one is the agriculture mitigation ordinance, the agriculture buffer ordinance. And then the acquisitions have to do with the tax ordinance.
But I hear what you're saying, we could even streamline it even more, like we could say, advise on the city's agricultural mitigation and buffer requirements, possible acquisitions, and policies, something like that, and policies related to acquisitions. So you could be silent on where the money is coming from, is that what you're?
Well, because it is, I mean, it's important, right, I mean, the way I'm looking, I think, I can't remember what you said, you said one's acquisition and the other one is
The
something.
management.
Yeah, right, because part of that, like on the second one specifically, right, is, you know, a project comes forward and says, we wanna do a one-to-one ag mitigation for a Measure J vote, right, and it comes to this commission, and you're like, well, it's class 1 soil, maybe it should be a 2-1 mitigation or a 3-1 mitigation, like that's all covered under the second one, like around the mitigation process, around buffer requirements. When we look at some of the projects that are coming forward, Palomino Place, things like that, we're looking at either reduced or larger buffers between zones, like that's all coming, right, that comes here, like, what do you guys think about that? Like, you talk to us, I mean, it's more, you know, it's, I think the first one, again, is more on the maintenance and restoration of the space that we have, right, and focusing in on Gill Ranch and acquiring the space. The second one I just see more as what Tracy's saying is on this piece of there's gonna be a lot of work that happens that needs to come here that's really related in the weeds, no pun intended, around what do you think that we should do around mitigation measures, right? What do you think we should do around requirements and buffers between a current use and one that's being proposed that needs to be called out specifically in your functions. I'm not saying that that's the right way to call it out, but I think they need to be separate from each other in some way.
But they're not separate because they're very different things. They're separate because it's a different way to look at it when some of them are required in, codes and ordinance and other are more general.
Right.
That's the only difference between those two. Of course, there's interaction between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like some, on the second one, some are habitat easements, they're not always agriculture easements, or, you know what I mean, like they're not, and so, yeah, I guess I didn't wanna, I don't know, personally I thought it was important to sort of, plus, we're only get 3 bullets, so. I was like, oh my God.
There's one commission that has more than 3.
So, I thought it was important to have one bullet
Yeah.
that
Make sure
talked
bullets
about
count.
the requirements,
Yeah.
like the specific things that the Muni Code has tasked the commission to do, I thought that should be sort of separate. And then there's all these other things the commission also does, but the, the mitigation and the buffer, those things are specifically called out, and then implementing Measure O and commenting on how Measure O is spent on new acquisitions, you know, that's another one. So I don't know, that's why I put those there, but I'm totally open to not
No, I
changing. That
get,
just was
no,
just
yeah,
the
I get
thinking.
it, after, like, discussing it, I understand now I understand the logic behind it, but maybe there could be
Like,
some wording that makes that even clearer.
Well,
I have an idea, perhaps there could be a general title to the bullets. One of them would be more management, perhaps, like you said, and the other one would be, you know, dealing with those municipal code and.
I think what I'm hearing is like kind of the topics that you cover, right, and the operations. And then it's more about what is your role in the development review process, which is where the ag mitigation and the buffer requirements come in. And then the city's purchasing and easement, so those, that's also kind of development, but that's on the city side, not on the private development, but on the city. So to me, it's like, here's your general topics, and then here's the development,
Right.
private and public.
So that goes to a point that, I wanna make, that it's not spelled out in here explicitly, this goes to explicit versus implicit, that we do review proposed developments, kind of all proposed developments, unless there's a very explicit reason not to, that they don't have, a habitat, open space nexus. And I do wanna make sure that that is explicit in here, that we say that we do review development projects.
Actually, there's gonna be a completely separate resolution for that. That is one of the things that was talked about a year ago now that we have to update, is which commissions get to do development review, because there have been a lot of changes at state law, and you can only have so many public meetings for certain types of development projects, so we're gonna have to be explicit with saying exactly what commissions and exactly what projects the different commissions get to look at. So that's on a whole separate track, and that will follow these. So
Okay.
there will be like a very specific resolution that says, your commission does X.
Okay, and I wanna make sure also that, because the development projects that we've reviewed, we've gone beyond just, the mitigation and the ag buffer, that we advise on the actual footprint of the project itself. What's happening, not in the ag buffer, but on, you know, the rest of the development footprint.
The open space and habitat elements.
Because there's the habitat element, not just the open space. And I wanna make sure that gets in here, so that doesn't, so we don't, you know, a future council might not be as supportive, and, so I wanna make sure that's in here.
But can we do that?
Well, a lot of it is establishing the criteria, establishing the policies, and then implementing those. So again, based on how state law is, a lot of the stuff that happens inside the city, you're not gonna be able to have a lot of commissions looking at it. The Measure GRD projects are a little different because they wanna annex in, and so that's a very different process. But anything that's internal, like a lot of the stuff that maybe happened previously won't be continuing. But we still are gonna have like a really specific, if you look at it, then this other group is not gonna be able to look at it, you know, so it's like, that's still to come.
Well, I'm talking about even on the, you know, these Measure JR projects, we look beyond just the ag buffer, we look at the rest of the footprint of the proposed project itself.
Right. Or if there was, like disc, if there was a channel that went through the
Exactly.
middle of it, right? And so there was that discussion about
Yeah,
that,
that's fine,
so,
exactly.
you know, it's,
Yeah.
right.
Well, and the Village Farms has the spot in the back, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's all this, right?
Exactly, so I wanna make sure that gets in here, so that 5 years from now, we don't get pushed aside and we don't get to look at that anymore.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, I totally hear what you're saying, and I think.
Well, actually, we have, because what's upcoming is, each project, and each Measure JRD project will be very specific with this commission's looking at it, that commission's looking at it. So there will be a lot of, kind of per project tasks that are created and assigned. And again, it's because these projects and these, they're gonna be led by council. And so you're kind of doing the work that council needs in order for them to make a decision.
Yeah.
And in order for the community to make the decision, so it's really not gonna be as much, the commissions are starting the process, it's gonna be council starting
No,
the process.
I understand all that, but what's written in here right now is not that we advise council on any of that. We advise council on ag mitigation and the ag buffer.
What I'm saying is in the future, you will do it as assigned.
I wanna say in here, and other elements.
I mean, all we can do is we can bring it to the subcommittee, and the subcommittee can
Yeah, I
discuss
agree,
it,
yeah.
and then that will go to council for adoption,
And-
so
All I'm saying is I wanna enable space in here to include other things as appropriate. Do you, does that make
Other
sense?
developments as appropriate?
Other parts of proposed developments, beyond just the mitigation of the ag buffer.
Yeah, so if, under the new set, like under a setup where it says, you know, we come forward and the resolution says, okay, my assumption is that this commission would deal with, I would assume, every JRD project, because it's land being annexed in, it's ag land. So I think by default, this commission would see, I would think, every one of those projects. I think what we just need to figure out is what is, within that, what I'm hearing you say is it's not called out here. Is there a way for us to reference this new document or whatever it is that lays out what that process is for you to review? Or for this
Right now,
commission-
we're limited
Yeah.
here
No, I
to
hear
just
you.
ag mitigation and the ag buffer.
Yeah, totally, no, I hear you.
Well, yes and no. I mean, again, number 2, the second bullet is just, cause like you could, I hear what you're saying, cause like on the first bullet, you could say, you know, habitat restoration, wildlife habitat, stuff like that is, you know, potentially something that you would comment on as part of a development project, right? Like something, but I hear what you're saying, but I feel like, yeah, we could add like we could add it there and just say, couldn't we just add like comma, yeah, open space and habitat elements of development projects?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, cause that is,
As assigned, or as,
Yeah,
That's there, yeah,
yeah,
we'll figure, yeah, when we meet, and I understand where you're coming from,
Yeah.
and we can always chat offline too, but I understand what you're saying, where you're coming from. I think Zoe took some notes, and I can talk with Bob and figure out, and Tracy, and figure out, what can we plug in there that calls that out? I mean, I understand what your
I
concern
just
is.
wanna,
and
a general placeholder.
I totally, yeah.
I don't want 6 years from now, a developer to say, oh, it's not in here that you get to even look at this, and council saying, oh, yeah.
I totally,
You don't get to.
no, I got you, yeah, I hear you, and I understand where you're coming from on that, so I think we can kind of chat internally and figure out what the best way to address that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
okay.
Isn't all of this sort of as assigned? Like, there's not a lot that we bring to Trace, like, I mean, we have ideas, but I guess, I'm just,
well, I mean, again, the
I
stuff
think
in
to
the
the
muni code.
purpose, I mean, on matters relating to the city's open space and habitat, I mean, that,
Yeah.
maybe that's
Yeah.
just, anyway. I'll stop, I will not beat the dead horse, but, anyway, just.
No, and I
this
think that
body
there's,
serves the
yeah,
city.
but I think there are things that come up, and I think the restoration project we're talking about right now at UC Davis
Yeah.
wasn't something that, I mean, that was born out of meetings
Right.
3 years ago. It was like, hey, we got this kind of crazy idea, and the council didn't say, can you
Go
guys
do
go
this.
work on doing that? That was a group of people that we sat on a Zoom, and it was like, how cool would it be if we could do this? And then it happened. So I mean, there's ways, I mean, the only thing I'm saying is I hear what you're saying, but I want you to know, hopefully, that
Yeah,
that you have you can look at these projects and kind of bring these ideas to your fellow commissioners and say,
I think
is there
that's
something
in the
we can do?
strategic plan though, right?
There's
Like
still-
I felt like it linked to all these places in the strategic plan, so in a way, yeah, anyway. That's the space.
There's
as well.
room for proposition, right?
There is.
Yeah.
And then the one other thing I did wanna say is that I do wanna see something about public engagement in here, because it is something, for instance, that we did a lot of for the strategic plan. And right now, there's no real space for us to do public outreach as a commission,
Outside of the general plan.
outside of the general plan, yes.
And I think, and I think that's a good point. And I think one of the pieces that is gonna be important, right, is we know that the Measure Road tax is gonna be up for renewal.
Yeah.
And I think highlighting what this commission, what the city has done around open space and connectivity, and not just purchasing mitigation out in the middle of nowhere on these islands, but purchasing, being strategic about where we purchase land so public can access it. And doing engagement events and outreach to showcase to the community, this is where your dollars are going, right? There's the new signs down at the South Fort Computer that talks about the tax, right? Like, this is why this is here. I think that's an important piece that could be a part of that really lays the groundwork for like, no, this is a really important tax measure that we have that provides a lot of open space for people in this community, and how do we, keep that going? So I think that's a good point.
Yeah, so I just wanna make sure that this document doesn't straitjacket us, essentially. I don't want it to, force us to do tons of outreach or whatever, but I just want us to be enabled to do it, when appropriate.
You want us to do a lot of outreach.
And just so, I know some of them you're not implying this, but there wasn't the intention at all to try and limit or straitjacket the commissions on their work.
Right.
That's why, we wanted to come here, again, I know you weren't implying that, but, it's to come and say, give us your feedback on this, because this is the work that you're doing on a monthly basis, right? So, so I appreciate the feedback on wanting to be able to have some flexibility in it, and that's what we want to have, flexibility within kind of guardrails, if you will, right? So.
In some ways, Patrick, that first function, like, it's nice the way the strategic plan summarized on the website is in those 6 areas, because I think, 6 areas, I think that gets to some of I really like those areas in the strategic plan are really clear, so just one thought as you take back the comments of maybe there's ways between 1 and 2 clarifying around those 6. Cause then that would get to your piece about public engagement.
I mean, right now it just reads, and I think Ramiro brought this up, right now it just reads, all we're doing is providing advice to city council, and that's not the only thing that we end up doing. We end up doing stuff outside of that council realm as well. Other thoughts, commissioners?
Although under a purpose, that's what it is, advise on matters.
Yeah, but to me, that's implying that we're advising council. I mean, I guess you could say that when you're doing public outreach is to collect information to provide to council. So I guess that's a roundabout way of including it, but it's still a little bit of a stretch.
And that's the base of the work of every commission, is to advise council, right?
Well, yeah.
But that is kind of what the commission is supposed to be,
Yeah.
right? It's sort of like
That's what,
a clearinghouse for community comments on whatever the topic of the commission is, right? And then so that the city council gets that information from the commission.
So you don't think there needs to be an explicit public outreach language in here?
I mean, I guess the thing I'm struggling with is, and I guess, it was a struggle writing these, is that there are some things in my mind that are generic to all commissions. And then there are things that are specific to this one. And so I was trying to make this more specific to this one, as opposed to, yes, commissions.
Well, could we have some sort of overarching thing about commissions doing public outreach in general to provide, public comments to council or something like that? I just want to make sure that we're enabled to do that when appropriate in the future.
Can you give us an example of what you're thinking? You're thinking like a separate event.
Yeah, so when we put together the strategic plan, we had a massive public outreach campaign. It was
And
surveys
that
and multiple additional meetings.
So now that you're implementing the plan, is there like a once a year event that you do? So for instance, we have other commissions, like the Human Relations Commission, they have a really defined public outreach, and they do like the Cesar Chavez event, they do the Martin Luther King Jr. event, so they have very specific public outreach. The Police Accountability Commission, they do forums on like know your rights kind of forums. So I'm trying to imagine, like, what, are you thinking like a once a year? Are you thinking like based on things that we have to focus on?
Nothing regular like that, but when we go into the 2030 strategic plan process, I'm assuming that we're gonna have public outreach on that.
We could come up with new things, right?
Well, we did say every 5 years, if the strategic plan says every 5 years, we'll check in with the community.
Right.
So like the last time we didn't do a meeting, we did a survey.
But, there were public meetings with, the integrated pest management. There's been, outreach on even just the wetland project. There's these things that come up on an ad hoc
Thinking if we
basis.
tie it to like some of these bigger initiatives, like tie it to the plan or a new program initiation or something like that, then it makes sense to do a big push. And then the check-in points, like every so often.
I don't think that we need to overthink
No.
this. I just think that we need a placeholder that, the commissions.
We'll do like an overarching.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think the thing, yeah, and I haven't had a chance, we haven't kind of gotten all the information together yet, like compiled the feedback and looked at it all, but I think, I've heard it from other commissions too, of kind of just making this overarching statement, and obviously, we're talking about this right now, but, involved in it, these specific points that we're talking about, maybe we can wordsmith something and figure out if there's a way that we can do something like that.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure that, there's the space there for us to engage the public.
Yeah.
That's not just these, monthly commission meetings that
Define,
that the minutes then go to council. That there's these other bigger processes out there that we engage in.
Were these overarching points the one you were referring to that we consult with the consultants, that we'd be speaking with them to develop these overarching points, because you mentioned them earlier?
I think if the overarching piece, I almost wouldn't think like an introduction, like, the consultant won't be on board by the time we take this up on the
The
21st.
consultant is general plan. So the
Yeah.
consultant
Yeah,
is like that
this is a
separate.
general plan. This
There's
is
different
Yeah.
things.
The
just
general
about
plan.
like
But
commissions in general.
we're talking about kind of setting the tone for all commissions, like
Yeah,
right.
environmental justice, social
Yeah.
equity, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But community outreach and community focus, that is like a big priority of council. So we definitely see that as like council focus, and we want commission focus too.
Yeah, it's almost like why the city council has these commissions, right? It's like, these are the generic reasons, like to gather public input, to go out and talk to the
Exactly.
community, blah, 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 right? Those apply to all the commissions, right? And then there's these sort of specific areas, like each
Yeah.
commission then has a specific sort of little piece of that, and there's a subject area, right? That's how I was viewing it in my mind too.
Yeah, and I would much rather have it be that overarching thing than try to
Yeah,
Yeah,
cram
because then
all those things in
everyone
here.
has to
Yeah,
have the
yeah.
exact same, right?
And
Like,
they're
you don't want them to
all
have to be
different.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even like senior commission, they will go to the specific, like senior housing, and that's kind of their outreach, is they go to where people live and say, hey, did you know this thing was going on at the senior center? So that's kind of how they focus. And so everybody's very different.
yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds good.
Okay. Anything else,
Feedback, very good
commissioners?
feedback.
No,
Good.
it's getting clearer.
Okay,
Yeah, it's not-
those
it's not
were,
easy.
those were my points, and I appreciate the discussion and,
Yeah,
Lindsay, do you think you got your point across? I'm trying, you feel satisfied with the,
Which point?
well, just that one.
all of them.
All of them.
I guess so. I'm like, no, not too much. Like, we have public business, but no. I think good. I guess just, what's the next step here, or the time, what's the process next? Like, this doesn't come back to us, or it does?
So this will go, so we'll be meeting, we have a couple of weeks so we have commission interviews in the next handful of days, and then once this wraps up, I don't know how many, is this the last commission? We have a couple more?
Yeah, more.
Okay, so so every commission, is doing the same exact process that you're doing here this evening. Once the last commission completes that, then, we'll meet internally as a subcommittee with staff there's multiple staff that have gone to all the different meetings. We'll all meet, get together around a table, put all the feedback that we've heard, and then, Vice Mayor Beitler and I will work as a subcommittee to take that feedback and put it into a document that will come back to council on the 21st of May. So that's what we're looking, that's the timeline for now. We're looking to get that adopted on the 21st of May. And we may reach out, subsequently out to your chair, of commissions, hey, does this look, kind of what you guys were thinking? And, we're not gonna, it'll come out in the staff report, but we'll also reach out and have conversations as we move forward, just to make sure we're.
There will be more to come, we talked about the general plan process, that won't be in May. that is coming, but it won't be in May. The development review process, that is coming, it won't be May 21st,
Yeah.
but that is coming. So there's more to come, there's more procedural stuff to come, there'll be cleanup in the code that's coming from some of the changes at other commissions. So this whole process is gonna be still months
Yeah.
more, but this is kind of a touch point for you to know that this is kind of the new focus that we're trying to do and get ready for the general plan. But more to come, please stay engaged.
Great, well, thank you for coming out tonight and leading us through this and bearing with us and our comments.
Yeah.
No, it's very helpful.
Very good.
Good. Okay, well then we will move on, to, I guess, liaison assignment updates. So right now, it looks like I'm the only one, with assignments,
Is
so,
that the next thing on the agenda? Oh,
yeah, cause we only had the one item, right?
oh, yeah.
So nothing on Yellow Habitat Conservancy, but with the Lower Poudre Creek Coordinating Committee, you have a bit of an update. So right now, we're trying to, the focus of the committee over the last 6 months, and it will be ongoing, or it's maybe even longer than that now, is the lower end of Poudre Creek. So really, it's in the Davis planning area. Most of the work from Lower Poudre Creek Coordinating Committee over the past 20 years has been further upstream in the Winters area, but we've realized that there are some major issues to deal with down on the lower end of Poudre Creek. So one of which is the check dam. Unfortunately, it's south of this particular map, because I would like to point to things, but I can't. There's on the Los Rios farm, there's a check dam they use for irrigating the rice fields. And it's a fish barrier. They take it down temporarily to let salmon through, but it's not down the entire time the salmon are out there. It blocks other fish, other movements. So we've been grappling with how to deal with that. So there are kind of two options on the table. One's kind of a short-term fix and one's a longer-term fix. The short-term fix is just a tiny little bypass right around the check dam, kind of right through the parking lot right there. It's maybe 1,000 feet long, if that. And it just would enable fish to kind of move up, essentially a fish ladder up and around. And so we are moving forward with putting in an application to the Department of Fish and Wildlife for a planning grant to plan that portion out and to, hopefully in a year then go after an implementation grant and move on that. That's kind of a short-term fix. It's not a full bigger fix of the lower end of the creek. So the longer range plan still is to build an actual new, maybe 5 mile long or maybe even longer, essentially new stretch of Poudre Creek that would bypass that area entirely and just do kind of a southeast cross down into the lower part of the bypass itself. And so there was discussion at last month's meeting, and so going forward with this planning grant application, we are going to, I think, include language to make sure that if it's accepted, is not going to kind of short circuit that longer term vision, and just say that it's not going to be in place of that it will be additional. And that's going to be, like multiple tens of millions of dollars. We're talking about a decade or more until that gets implemented, but that's still kind of firmly the vision of what we want to do there to really improve that south end of the creek and start kind of rebuilding what's going on down there and rebuilding the fish populations and other ecology. So, yeah.
So that additional, course for Poudre Creek would have water flowing all the time? Or?
Yeah, that's right. And it will be kind of augmenting what was already a bit of a distributary to the creek itself. But yeah, it would be kind of a permanent flowing water source as opposed to that check dam and the dead kind of slack water that it creates.
And would have to go through, private property or?
I think it mostly just goes down through the wildlife area.
Okay, so that would make it easier.
Yeah. For the most part, I haven't seen the actual footprint as opposed on, what parcels it is, but it looks like it's mostly, the wildlife area. So that's my update on that.
Okay.
Long range calendar, what are we looking at next month, Tracy?
Well, I'm probably, I don't know if I'll have a budget overview ready by then. And I was thinking we do have this strategic plan tracking, which we could do, but I was thinking that it might be better to wait until we have the two new commissioners, because it'll be kind of a good overview for, have everybody go through and kind of go through it all, and it's sort of like would be one way to kind of get them up to speed as well. It would seem funny to do it in June and then have them start September. So, so unfortunately, so I don't have that one, so, and then Emma, so that's all I kind of have. I don't know, I don't have much for June. The wetlands thing isn't, the Davis Wetlands consultant report, not really ready to talk about that. They didn't really do exactly what we wanted, so it's kind of difficult to sort of give you something. We're still working on it, but I don't know what that would be if we sort of talked about that. I suppose that's a possibility. We could sort of give you an update on that, but unfortunately, it's not as meaty as I wanted it to be. So I don't know, does anybody else have anything that maybe they would want to talk about? But that's
If nothing pressing, why don't you and I just talk about it, and it may be that we don't need to meet in June.
Yeah, maybe we don't need to meet in June, I
but-
don't know, we can talk about it,
Let's just wait and see.
okay. And I should have mentioned,
Last week.
I forgot, but,
Yeah.
Barbara and, Jenny would be mad if I didn't, mention this, but they did a press release on, visiting the open space areas in spring, and the Davis
Nice.
Enterprise had a
Yeah.
nice above the fold picture of South Fork with, the
Oh, fantastic.
information about it, so I can leave it here if you guys wanna take a look
Yeah,
at
I
it, but,
saw that, yeah.
a little credit to Mark Hashofsky on the
Mhm.
photo,
Yeah,
so, anyway, I just wanted to, mention that, because it was some good, thank you, some good, publicity for the open space areas and, getting people out there, and we didn't just mention South Fork in it, it went out on social media as well. We mentioned, in the fall, we mentioned South Fork and then three different sites, and then this one, we mentioned 3 different sites, so we're trying to not just mention South Fork, trying
good.
to, spread it out and mention the other ones. So I think in this one, I mentioned El Macero and the Mace Habitat area, and I can't remember the third one that I mentioned, but anyway, trying to spread the love around all the different areas. So,
Were you saying something?
no.
Oh, well, never mind.
Thank you, Enterprise, right?
That's it.
So, anyway, that's I forgot to mention that during announcements.
Okay, any last words? Adjourned.
Okay, thank you.